Oh, bit of a peek behind the curtain for Predator Badlands. Yeah, it's not going to be for everyone. I know lots of people don't like the movie. But some people that do like the movie will find this quite interesting, I think, actually. Um, and those that are hit or miss on the movie, maybe stay and watch, because this interview with Variety goes into quite a lot of stuff, and it seems they were quite aware of the potential for it to be too Marvel-fied. Maybe not self-aware enough for some people, because some people think it was way too Marvel-y. But I think it's worthwhile taking a look at, to be honest. I think you guys will find this an interesting interview, or at least I hope you do, because I did. I thought this was a genuinely interesting interview. So it's a wide-ranging piece from Variety. Bit of a peek behind the curtain. The title here is pretty well-rounded over what's totaled here. You know, Predator Badlands director Dan Trachtenberg on the cliffhanger ending, why the Avengers could influence future films, and the surprise Stranger Things cameos. But it's actually the sort of conceptual parts which I found most interesting. The thought process is why people are doing what, the decisions, the choices, and just overall the level of awareness that they had. That's what I think is quite compelling in this article, this interview. So scroll all the way through this crap. There's a lot of nonsense where I don't understand why. Variety basically summarised the whole movie. It's like, why are you doing that? It's super weird. But anyway, it gets to this. How did you approach designing the creatures on Genna? Were you making the creatures first and then building a story around them, or vice versa? I think this is interesting. Because actually, one of the great things I liked about this movie was the bio element, the flora and fauna. I actually thought it was quite inventive, quite unique, almost. So, Dan Trachtenberg said this: "It all really came from the narrative. Creature design is really hard. Having done it a couple of times now, it tends to be like, we've seen this kind of silhouette before. What if we make it curvy here instead of straight? And what if we put the horns on it? Because we can do visual effects so well now, all of it looks cool, but none of it becomes iconic or stands out," which I think is quite fair, actually. There does seem to be a lot of creatures which are very same in their design. I didn't want to fall into any of those traps. For instance, we had the scene set in the razor grass field, and a creature that would have evolved to feed in those fields would have developed armour on its hide and a beak to cover its mouth to help push away the grass. So that crazy Cthulhu-y snout could graze. We just tried to apply that everywhere, thinking of what the actual ecology or the evolution of the planet would be, so the creatures end up feeling related. Not just cool for cool's sake, or scary for scary's sake. I like that. I think that's great. Shows care and attention at the end of the day. How did you go about designing Bud? This will get people. He's kind of cute. And Predator and cute have not been synonymous in the past. Has self-awareness. The movie is very much about characters that appear to be one way, but then are actually quite different. I thought about Rocket Raccoon or Groot. Adorable, but also super badass. We're making a movie where the monster, Predator, ugly mother effer, is a protagonist. I did not think that should be the only crazy idea. I thought a lot about how Terminator 2 has one of the most iconic lines in action cinema. Hasta la vista, baby. That line comes from a scene where a robot is bonding with a teenage boy. One of the warmest places in the story. I just love the idea of constantly playing with what felt intense and visceral and ferocious and what was emotional. I love that as badass as this movie is, there's also a warmth and emotionality to it. And then technically, I play a lot of World of Warcraft, and the Murloc is a creature from World of Warcraft that informed her design a little bit. Then it was bouncing back and forth between what a big bud would look like and what a small bud would be like to find the right stuff. Quite interesting. Did you worry that you were going to make Bud too cute? A little bit. So again, he is aware. Does seem to be aware anyway. So hopefully that maybe reassures some people about future stuff. Which is why Bud has dope action scenes and does some gnarly things. Even Prey was a story with a warrior and her dog. That came from the silhouette of Mad Max and his pup. There's always something really cool to me about the badass with the sidekick. is something that makes us care in a very specific way. We care about creatures and animals very differently than we care about humans. I love the idea of him backpacking and something little beside him. I always have in my head one shot in the Monster Squad. All of the kids with Frankenstein and the silhouette of the setting sun. Sometimes I think in that kind of iconography. So that informed it too. It's quite, to me, I think all this concept stuff's really interesting. Like why certain things were designed certain ways. Why the decisions were made. Was Bud always going to be the baby Kalisk? Pretty much. I should say, actually, at one point, we went down a road of maybe it becomes the Kalisk. Almost like a gremlin. That would have been predictable, but that also would have been quite cool. The same creature that appears small and tiny, then molts its skin, and then becomes huge. That just felt a little bit too supernatural to me, but I know everyone's taste may vary. The thing that I ended up really loving is that both Dec and Thea are dealing with really upsetting familial situations, abusive parents, so to speak, abusive family, whilst hunting down what's supposed to be the most ferocious thing. And actually, that's the thing in the movie that has the best family relationship. Once again, it all comes from the desire to surprise. Again, love it or hate it. It's interesting at the very least. In the moment, with the title card, there's a giant cliffside, and in the background with a huge worm-like thing crawling on it. What was that? That's actually quite an interesting part of the movie. There is this like almost Dune-esque, right? It was almost like one of the giant sandworms from Dune. I always called that the rock biter. There's a great line in the Never-Ending Story. A rock biter, a rock biter. There's always an earworm for me. They're in the background in a few shots, but you're like, how come we never actually get up in there and interact with it? We're always trying to have some sort of food chain element in the frame somewhere and always make it feel like it's deadly. So often when we do these kinds of movies like Skull Island, in the first half of a King Kong movie or whatever, the place is majestic, but then the creatures are deadly. If we're saying it's a death planet, everything should be trying to kill and everything should feel dangerous. So there's something in the corner that's like eating something else. How did James Cameron come to be listed in the special thanks in the end credits? Came in two forms. He'd seen Prey and loved it, which there's no words for that. And we shot Badlands in New Zealand, up in Auckland, and he was down in Wellington making Avatar. He invited me to see him doing some of Avatar, and we spent some time on his soundstage. And when we were in the edit bay, I pitched him what we were doing with the movie. This brand new process, having a guy in a prosthetic suit, and then visual effects are taking over for his face. Then we reconvened at dinner, and when we sat down, he said, I was thinking about what you're doing on the way over here. And I've got to tell you, I think it's going to work. That blew wind in my sails all the way back to Auckland. That's cool. Then, when we were finishing the movie, the cut was in pretty good shape. Not totally finished, but pretty good. And I wanted to send it his way to get, if he had the time, whatever feedback he could give. He wrote me a note back that said many things, and one of them was, I have to tell you, when I first heard about what you're doing, I did not think it was going to work. But holy crap, you really pulled it off. And that put wind in my sails. I think he just knows exactly what someone needs to hear when they need to hear it. He's just a tremendously generous filmmaker. You were going to direct season 5 of Stranger Things before the strikes changed your schedule. But how did you wind up using the show's creators, Matt and Ross Duffer, as the voice for the computer on Dec's ship? I did not know that. What the fuck? We were mixing Badlands on the very same stages where they were mixing Stranger Things at the same time. We had some of the same sound mixers working on both, and we needed to do the Yautja ship voice. And I was like, what if I asked the Duffers to do it? How crazy would that be? They had no idea that I was going to hand him a piece of paper with like NGILA as a word. Good luck. They had to very quickly learn Yautja. The computer voice is heavily treated and needs to sound affected. So actually smearing their voices together and then doing other stuff in the computer made the perfect voice. That's so bizarre, but alright, it's cool. Since Badlands integrates the Alien universe, did you figure out when in time your movie is in relation to the other movies in both franchises? Now that's interesting. Very intentionally, it is the furthest into the future in both Predator and Alien. When we were making it, I wasn't really sure what was going on with Alien Romulus. And I don't even know how aware I even was of Alien Earth. So I just didn't want to step on anyone's toes. I wanted to make sure we were doing our own thing. And selfishly, I'd also done so much Predator in different time periods that I was excited for this to be in the future, even past Alien Resurrection. That is fascinating. Do you know what's interesting about that? Is that Weyland-Yutani once again becomes something past Alien Resurrection. Because then, like, there's some dumb dialogue in Alien Resurrection where, like, Walmart bought it all or some crap. That's genuinely interesting. I like it. I like it a lot, actually. At the very end of Badlands, a ship containing Deck's mother appears on the horizon. Are you deliberately setting up how you want the franchise to continue, with Deck confronting his mother as we meet female Yautja for the first time? What I love about the ending is that it works as a final twist on the story that we've just been seeing, but also sets up an expectation for something that I think is pretty groovy. If I were to go forward, I don't think that would be the whole reason, but that would be a very cool element to include. So not a direct sequel. And you'd want to continue a Deck story. What's so great is we now have all these interesting characters, and who knows what the next one is. I didn't know the next one was going to be Killer of Killers or Deck's story, and then it ended up we doing both at the same time. There's many open doors to walk through next. That's for sure. A convergence, almost, of all these narratives. So how far inside those doors have you looked to start planning where you would want to go? It can all go out the door once we start putting pen to paper on stuff, but I've looked as far as I could to feel comfortable about what I'm doing. Every movie is a complete thought. Not that much unlike the early Marvel stuff before the first Avengers movie, where it's like, those are great movies, and lo and behold, we're actually setting up that things could come together in a delicious way, but they weren't like, see how everything's interconnected like crazy all of a sudden. So I'm trying to learn that lesson and make sure that any of these movies that we do are awesome ideas for movies on their own. Killer of Killers ends by connecting back to Predator, Predator 2 and Prey. And since you did just evoke the Avengers, have you thought about integrating all of those different threads together into a larger thing? It's hard. It's fun to geek out and think, oh my god, wouldn't it be cool if... Even on a movie that you'd never expect that to happen. But it's only cool if the journey there is equally worth taking. It does seem to give a shit. So how long do you think you could live inside this franchise? I don't think I could be living in it this long. Oh, it says, I don't think I would be living in it this long. What I realise is that because the Yautja has the code that it has, it's allowed for me to make the kind of movies that I've always wanted to. It is not Michael Myers or Jason. It's not there to just kill victims in its periphery. It's a creature with culture and a code. And it's looking for the most worthy. That resonates in our lives where we're constantly thinking about how we measure up to the outside world. To ourselves, in career and love and whatever it is. So I get to keep making movies with this fulcrum that bears all this thematic weight and brings out the emotional storytelling that I love. And also because it's this kick-ass creature with unique designs and assets that other franchises don't have. I get to also make those stories with kick-ass action. It really has allowed for me to make very different kinds of stories and have them each be worthy of the franchise itself. That's brilliant. I think this is a great piece of article. Genuinely. How far in the future? Even past Alien Resurrection. Wicked. And we kind of knew that from the designs and stuff, but it's brilliant. I love this. This is a great interview. This is a peek behind the curtain. This is really, really good. To me, it's interesting. But yeah, leave your thoughts down below. Don't forget to hit subscribe on your way out. Bye-bye now.